Masechet Menaḥot Daf He. Back in the first Mishnah, we learned that for most mincha offerings, if the Kohen does kemitzah shelo lishma, not for that mincha offering, then the offering is still valid, but it does not fulfill the obligation of the owner. The Mishnah mentioned two exceptions, minchat choteh and minchat kenaot, where if it's done shelo lishma, it's completely invalid. Yesterday, Rav added yet another example of an exception. According to him, Korban HaOmer, the one that's brought on the second day of Pesach, if that is brought Shelo Lishma, also, according to Rav, it's completely invalid. But now we're going to see a different opinion, that of Resh Lakish. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar, Minchat HaOmer shekemasa shelo lishma keshera, u'shiareha en ne'echalin, ad shetavi minchat HaOmer acheret v'tatirenna. Resh Lakish teaches that a Minchat HaOmer, where the Kohen did kemitzah shelo lishma, he had in mind this is going to be some other type of korban mincha. It is a valid offering. You can continue and take that kemitzah and burn it on the mizbeach. Now, normally, for a normal korban ha'omer that's done properly, after you do the kemitzah and burn that kometz on the mizbeach, then the leftovers the kohanim can eat. In this case, however, shiareha, the leftovers, cannot be eaten because the korban ha'omer was brought from the new grain, the new barley that they just cut. It's chadash, and you're only allowed to eat chadash once you bring the korban ha'omer. However, this does not count as a korban ha'omer. It is a valid korban. You can continue to burn it, but it doesn't count as the korban ha'omer, and because he had in mind something else. Therefore, they cannot eat it until they bring another korban ha'omer and do it properly, and then that will permit the grain that they had brought. Now it's chadash, but now once you bring the second proper korban ha'omer, then all the chadash barley is permitted, and then the kohanim can eat it. And so, according to Resh Lakish, basically, minchat ha'omer has a very similar law to most korbanot, most other mincha ha'omer korbanot, where it's valid, but it does not fulfill the obligation of the owner. In this case, it's a communal offering. It's a communal obligation, so it does not fulfill the mitzvah of bringing korban ha'omer, with the effect that it will not make the hadash yet permitted, but it's still valid. So, okay, you have a good min korban mincha, can't eat the hadash, bring another one, then you can go back and eat the hadash. Now we ask a question. Wait a second. If the leftover cannot be eaten until you bring the second korban ha'omer, well then how can you burn even that kometz on the fire before you bring the second proper korban ha'omer? After all, we have a pasuk in Yechezkel that says, "Mimashke Yisrael, min hamutar liYisrael." The pasuk said, "From the well-watered pastures of Israel, for a meal offering, for a burnt offering, for a peace offering." This comparison of the well-watered things of Israel, and then it mentions offerings, the Midrash learns that you can only offer something to Hashem if it's permitted to Israel. So it would apply to Nesachim. Only if the wine is permitted to a Jew to have, then you can bring it as Nesech. Only if the wheat, or the barley in this case, only if the flour that you're offering is permitted to a Jew to eat, if it has to be kosher. If it's not kosher, then you cannot offer it on the mizbeach either. And that would be a problem in this case. They brought this korban ha'omer. The kohen did kemitzah, having in mind it's something else, minchat choteh or whatever. So now the chadash is still prohibited. The kohanim cannot eat the leftovers. If the kohanim cannot eat the leftovers because the flour is chadash and is prohibited, then it also will be prohibited to offer on the mizbeach. So how could you offer it on the mizbeach? You should say, okay, wait, you did the kemitzah, leave it in a bowl, don't put it on the fire yet, and wait till you bring another korban ha'omer properly, and only then burn it. But it doesn't say that. He says you can burn it, and then only the kohanim can eat the leftovers. Challenge to Resh Lakish. Amar Rav Ada bar Ahava, Kasavar Resh Lakish en mechusar zeman lebo bayom. We're going to see a couple of answers to this question. The first one is by Rav Ada bar Ahava. He says that according to Resh Lakish, en mechusar zeman, there's no lacking of time for the same day. If normally you bring the Korban HaOmed at 10 a.m., so even if, so therefore, it doesn't matter that now the one that you brought at 10 a.m. it turned out to be invalid because the Kohen had something else in mind. Instead, they bring another one at 11 a.m. So you say, well, the one at 10 a.m. is mechusar zeman, right? It's lacking time because at this time, it's not yet permitted. So, because Chadash is prohibited. So maybe you say, well, no, then you can't burn it. No, but the rule is that if it's within the same day, so on the same 12-hour period, then we consider that whole day to be one unit of time. And it doesn't matter if the second one was brought at 11 a.m. and the first one was born at 10 a.m. You don't say, oh, the 10 a.m. Is before the 11 a.m., so it's mechusar zeman. It hasn't reached the time of 11 a.m. when Chadash should be permitted, and therefore it's prohibited until then. No, we look at the whole thing as one time period, and therefore, even though the second Omed will be later, but you can already burn it first. You can't eat it. So regarding eating, a regular person eating, a Kohen eating, there you have to actually wait till the Chadash, is permitted by the second proper Korban HaOmed. But when it comes to Kodesh, we have a rule that mechusar zeman, something that will be permitted later in the day, we can consider it already permitted now. Doesn't matter. And mukdam u'me'ochad kind of saying. Okay, so that's an answer. Now we have a problem with this answer. Mativ Rav Ada bered Rav Yitzchak. Yesh ba'afot she'en bemenachot. Yesh menachot she'en ba'afot. That we're going to challenge Rav Ada, who says that according to Resh Lakish, en mechusar zeman lebo bayom, when it comes to Kodesh, we're going to challenge him from the following long braita. It's really just one of the lines in this long braita. We'll learn the whole thing first, and then we'll see what the question is. It says there are some laws that apply to bird offerings that do not apply to flower offerings. And there's some laws that apply to flower offerings, but not to bird offerings. What are they? Yesh ba'afot she'afot ba'in b'nidbat shenayim. Ava mincha menachot nefesh ketiba. Regarding birds, two people can come together and bring one bird offering in partnership. You could do that with a bird. We each pay half, and then we bring it together. But for Korban Mincha, it says Nefesh. So therefore, only one person can bring a Korban Mincha. Two people cannot join together for a Korban Mincha. And furthermore, only birds are involved in bringing final atonement for the following people: Azav, Zava, Yoledet, and Mesorah. When their time is up, that they can be fully purified, they have to bring a bird offering. They cannot achieve their kapara, full kapara, with a flower offering. Vehu teru miklal isuran bakodesh mashen ken bemenachot. And furthermore, there is a way in which a bird is permitted from its otherwise prohibited status in the Kodesh. This is referring to Melika versus Shechita. Normally a bird that's outside the Mikdash has to be killed by Shechita. If you do Melika on a regular Cholin bird, you just go and break its neck from the back with your thumb, then it's no good. It's nebela, not kosher. So that's usually isuran. But if it's bakodesh, then you have to do melika. So here's a way that something that is normally asur is mutar when it's in the kodesh. That there is an example for a bird, but there is no example of this regarding menaḥot. This is going to be the source of our question, because according to what we just said, Rav Ada, in explaining Resh Lakish, there actually is an example here of a korban mincha, where the Kohanim cannot eat Chadash until the proper Korban Omed is brought. So for them, we say you have to wait till 11 o'clock. But for Kodesh, we say, oh, the whole day is one, and you don't have to wait. So something that is normally prohibited, you're saying is permitted for Kodesh regarding a Korban Mincha. So, but it doesn't say that. It says there, en ken bemenachot. This is going to be the question. Let's finish the Braita first. V'yesh b'menachot she'menachot te'unot keliut nufa b'hagasha v'yeshnan b'sibur ke'b'yachid ma she'en ken ba'ofot. there are laws that apply to flour offerings, because a flour offering needs a vessel. You have to take the flour and put it into a consecrated vessel. Otherwise, it won't be a proper korban mincha. Not so for a bird. A bird, first of all, you don't need a knife. You just do it with your thumb. And you don't have to put the blood into a vessel. You sprinkle it directly from the body of the bird. And tenufa, flour offerings, you have to wave them. Bird offerings, you don't wave. Hagasha, flour offerings, you have to bring it close to the corner of the mizbeach. But that's for flour offerings. Bird offerings, you don't have to. And for flour offerings, there is a public one, like the Korban HaOmed, and there's also private ones. But for bird offerings, there's only private bird offerings, no such thing as a Korban Sibur from a bird. That's the end of the Braita. Vim ita. Now, if Rav Ada is true, then Menaḥot name mashkachat la dehuteru miklal isuran bakodesh umaynihu minchat haomer. If it's true that en mechusar zeman lebo bayom, if that is a correct thing, then we have a korban mincha, which is an example of something that is normally prohibited. Normally, for most people outside the mikdash, even for Kohanim, you have to wait till the Omed is actually brought in order to eat from new grain. However, here we have the Korban Mincha, where you can burn the Kemitza even before you bring the Omer, because we say, En mechusa zeman lebo bayom. So if this is true, then it should have been included in this Baraita. But this Baraita said, no, there is no such thing. So what is this? This Minchat Omer. So the Baraita should have said that this should not have said that there's a way in which a bird offering has something over a mincha offering. Mincha offering also has a way in which something is permitted in the Kodesh, not normally prohibited. So that's the question. And the answer is, lav isurahu. No, we say that since there's no such thing as it's lacking time, as long as it's within the same day, it's not even considered prohibited. We were only listing things that are prohibited, but this is Kodesh, then it's permitted. Milika is something that's prohibited. If it's in Kodesh, okay, that overrides, and now it becomes permitted. But in this case, because there's no mechusar zeman, we consider all the actions of a day to be all within the same time period. We don't even say that the Hadash was prohibited at all for the Mikdash on this day, because we know that the Korban HaOmer is going to be brought at some point later in the day, and therefore, regarding Kodesh, it's permitted the whole day. It's not that it's asur and makes it mutar, because it's all one time period, it's always mutar. So we're not even calling this something that there's a heter of something that's normally an isur. Okay, another challenge. Mativ Rav Sheshat. Hiktim matan shemen lematan dam. Yimale'enu shemen ve'achzor v'yiten shemen achar matan dam. We're talking about a mesorah. If the Kohen put oil on him before blood, the proper procedure for a mesorah is, first, he takes the blood from the korban, and the Kohen puts it on the thumb and the toe and the ear of the mesorah. After he does the blood, then he takes oil. And the oil, he's first supposed to sprinkle 7 times towards the Kodesh, and then take the oil and put it also on the mesorah's body in those same places. That's the proper order. What if he goes out of order? It's a problem, no good. So if he does the oil before the blood, then he should then do the blood, fill up the oil again, and put the oil after the blood. And also, matan behonot lematan sheva, yimale'enu shemen, v'yachzor v'yiten matan behonot achar matan sheva. If he put the blood on the body of the mesorah before he sprinkled it 7 times towards the mikdash, towards the kodesh, then no good. Fill up the oil again, and then you did the sprinkling, that's fine. Fill it up again, and then put it on and sprinkle it, and then put it on the Kohen's body, on the Mesorah's body. You have to do it in proper order. Now, that's what the Baraita teaches. Here's the question. If you say that there's no such thing as something that the time is too early. As long as it's within the same day, it's all considered one time period. If you say that principle, Rav Ada, then why do you have to go back and do it again? What he did is already done. What's the difference what the order is? Okay, so he did the sprinkling, he did the blood, he did the oil on the mesorah first, and then he did it towards the kodesh. Okay, but eventually he's going to do it. He's going to do it towards the kodesh. So consider that as if it were before. There's no before. There's no after. It's all one time period. So why don't we say it's all the same thing? But we don't. We say the order matters, which means that we don't say the principle that there's no such thing as too early. There is some such thing as something too early, even in the mikdash. Good question. Amar Papa Shane Hilchot Mesorah Dichtiba Behu Havaya. Amar Katub Zot Tiyeh Torah Mesorah Tiyeh Bavayata Teher. Papa says no. You can't ask a question from the laws of Mesorah because there it says the word to be, as the pasuk says. This is Tihiyeh. This will be the law of the Mesorah. When it says that extra word Tihiyeh, it means you have to do it exactly in this way. So that's an exception. You have to do it precisely in this order. But if you don't have the word tihiyeh, and here with the Korban Mincha, we don't have the word tihiyeh, then that's where we say the whole day is considered all one. Good, we solved that problem. Now the Papa who just answered that question has his own question against Rav Ada. Mativ Rav Papa, hiktim hatato la'ashamo, lo ye'acher memares bedama, ela te'ubar surata v'teseh lebeta serefa. Again, question from a Mesorah. He's supposed to bring his asham first and then his hatat. What if he brought a hatat first before he brought the asham? Well, you might say, oh, I have a solution. You did shechita on the hatat, you received the blood. How about just give the blood to a mixer so that it won't coagulate? Let him mix the blood, then go, hurry up, do the asham, and finish that, and then you'll come back and you can deal with the hatat after. No, we don't do that. You slaughtered it out of order, so now you have to take that hatat and te'ubar surata. Let its form decay, meaning you leave it over till the next day, it becomes notad, and it's no good, and then it's taken out to be burned. So we don't say it's okay. We don't say, well, it's the same day, so what's the difference? We say, no, it has to be in precise order. So this is Rav Papa asking a question on Rav Ada. How come over here you care about the precise order? Obviously, there's a problem. We don't say that there's no such thing as mechusar zman in the mikdash. Time does matter in the mikdash. Now, before we answer the question, we wonder, Amai kamotiv Rav Papa, Rav Papa hu damar shan elchot mesorah dichtiba behu havaya. Why is Rav Papa asking a question? He's the one that just gave the answer that the laws of mesorah are different because it says havaya has to be in that order. This is also an example of elchot mesorah. So that's why it has to be in order. We already have an answer. Rav Papa himself gave an answer. No, Rav Papa is asking from this case because of a different reason. This case specifically doesn't fit in to his principle that he answered before. Because when you say havaya, everything has to be in order for mesorah. That's if it's an official right that's needed for the mesorah. But shechita lav avodahi. Shechita is not an official priestly right. Even a non-Kohen can do shechita. Of course, you have to do shechita in order to get the blood and do the next parts, and the shechita has to be done properly. That's true. But the shechita is not officially part of the temple sacrificial Kohen service. And therefore, the shechita, that doesn't fit into the havaya principle that has to be in order. V'en mechusar zeman lebo bayom, yeheh acher memares bedama, ve'lakrib hasham v'hadad likrab hatat. And if, as you say, Rav Ada, there's no such thing as something too early, as long as it's within the same day, then we should let someone else go and keep the blood mixing, and then go sacrifice the asham, and then come back. And that's the question of Rav Papa, even though it's mesorah, but it's part of the shechita process, which is not part of the havaya. And so now this is his challenge to Rav Ada. Ela amar Papa, hainu tamad Resh Lakish. So the Papa gives a new answer completely of Resh Lakish. This is now not Rav Adad. Rav Adad says everything that happens on that day is all considered one time. But the Papa gives a different answer completely. The Kasabar He'ir Mizrach Matir. The Rabbi Yochanan Resh Lakish Damrat Advayu. Afilu Bizman She Bet HaMikdash Kayam. Ha'ir Mizrach Matir. This opinion says that when it comes to Hadash, the rising of the sun permits. Now, you're going to do the Korban HaOmer at some point during the day. It's not done at sunrise. You got to do some other things first. So you do it sometime in the morning, say 10 a.m. Okay, even though at 10 a.m. that's when you actually bring the Korban HaOmer, the Hadash, the new grain is actually permitted from sunrise of the 16th of Nisan. And we know that because Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish, they both say that even nowadays, even when the Beit HaMikdash was standing, certainly now when it's nowadays, there is no korban. So you're going to wait forever if you're going to wait. So when there's no Beit HaMikdash, okay, this is the 16th. The 16th started, fine. Then you can eat the Hadash. But even when the Mikdash was around, where you're actually doing the Korban HaOmer, you don't have to wait till 10 a.m. when you bring the Korban HaOmer. As long as the sun rises, that's it. You can already bring it. And that's why it's permitted to burn the kemitzah even before you actually brought the proper Korban HaOmer. 10 a.m. we brought a Korban HaOmer, but it got messed up. The Kohen had in mind something else. You could still burn the Omer. Why? Still burn the kemitzah because it's after sunrise. Anytime after sunrise you can do it. You don't actually have to wait until you bring the proper korban. Now, this statement of Resh Lakish was not said explicitly. Resh Lakish never said it explicitly. Rather, we derived it from something else that he said. Di tanan en mevi'in minchat bikurim uminchat behema kodem laomer deba'inan mimashke Israel v'im hevi pasul. Mishnah teaches that one does not bring the minchat bikurim, that is first fruits, referring to first wheat that you have to bring. You can't bring that yet, nor can you bring a korban mincha, a meal offering that accompanies some animal sacrifices. You can't bring that before you bring the korban haomer. Why? Because you need mashke Yisrael. The pasuk from Yechezkel has to be something that you are allowed to eat, and you are not allowed to eat from the Chadash until you bring Korban HaOmer, and therefore you cannot offer these to the Mikdash either before that time. And if you brought it too early, before you actually bring the Korban HaOmer, it's invalid. However, if you bring it before, this is on Shavuot, you bring Shtei HaLechem. That is brought from wheat. The Omer is brought from barley, and then on Shavuot we bring it from wheat. So you're also not supposed to bring these items because from wheat before you bring Sheteh HaLechem, because that's also called bikurim. But in this case, if you brought it b'di'avad kasher, the reason is something interesting. Once you bring the Korban HaOmer on Pesach, all new grain is permitted to regular people. We can eat the new barley, the new wheat, everything is okay. In the Mikdash, however, you're allowed to bring the Korban HaOmer from the new barley, but still you're not permitted to bring sacrifices of new grain until Shavuot, when you bring the Shtei HaLechem. So the law of Hadash is more stringent in the Mikdash than it is at home. And so therefore, although you're not supposed to bring it, but b'diavad, if you did, it's kasher, because you don't have the problem of mimashke Yisrael. It actually is permitted for a person to have it, and therefore, if you bring it, b'diavad, it's okay. That's the Mishnah. And here we go. Here's where we derive it indirectly from Resh Lakish's words, his opinion about this. When it says if you bring it too early, it's pasul, that means if you bring something, you could bring a korban ha'omer, a bikurim, or minchat behema. If you bring any of these things from the Chadash on the 14th or the 15th, pasul, no good. Nobody can eat it. We can't eat it. The Beit HaMikdash can't eat it either. Ava b'shisha asari mevi kasher. But on the 16th, anytime on the 16th, even before you bring the actual korban ha'omer at 10 a.m., even if you bring something, it's one of these things, at 9 a.m., it's kosher. That's what Resh Lakish said. Now, how come he said that? V'kasheli levech k'mechusar zaman. Shouldn't it be lacking time? You didn't bring the korban ha'omer yet. We can see from here, al makasabar, here a mizrach matir. So the Papa says, that we can figure out from here that here a mizrach, once the sun rises, that's how you know that it is permitted. All this we derive actually from this pasuk that says, V'lechem v'kali v'chem lo tochelu ad esem hayom hazeh. Ad esem we interpret as being until sunrise, until this very day, until the day starts. Until you actually bring the korban. So you see here that licha techila. There is a mitzvah to wait till you actually bring the korban. That's why you're supposed to wait to bring the korban. But b'diavad, this is what Resh Lakish is telling us, as long as it's after sunrise of the 16th, it is permitted. And so we see that although Resh Lakish didn't say this reason explicitly, we can derive it through his words. Rava Amar. Now we're going to see a third opinion besides that of Rav, who was very stringent, and then Resh Lakish said Korban Omer is more or less like most Korbanot. Now we have Rava, who's going to be the most lenient regarding Menaḥot Omer. Menaḥot Omer shekemasa shelo lishma keshera ushyareha ne'echalin ve'ena sricha Menaḥot Omer acheret lahatira she'en machshava mo'elet ela b'mi she'ra'oi la'avoda b'davar ha'ra'oi la'avoda makom ha'ra'oi la'avoda. According to Rava, the Korban HaOmer, if the Kohen did Kemitzah and he had something else in mind, it is valid. That Resh Lakish agreed to. But he says furthermore, the leftovers can be eaten by Kohen right away. And you do not need to bring another Menaḥot Omer in order to permit it. It's totally valid. It fulfills the obligation of Menaḥot Omer for the congregation. Why? Why would he say this? Because he has another important principle. Machshava, improper intention, will only work to disqualify the mincha if the thought is done by someone who otherwise is fit to do avodah, and he's using material that is fit for avodah, and it's in a place that's also fit for avodah. What does that mean? Only if it's a kohen who can do avodah. If he has a blemish, if the kohen has a blemish, he can't do avodah. If the kohen who has a blemish would have improper thought, we don't care about his thought. That improper thought will have no effect on the korban. And and it has to be with some item that is fitting to do avodah with, and that excludes Menaḥot Omer because it's not fitting. It's a chidush. In what way is it not fitting? It's made from barley. Almost all other korban mincha offerings are brought from wheat. So this one is from barley. Now you bring barley and you're going to have an improper thought about barley. Improper thought about barley. Barley itself is not fit to bring a korban mincha. So since this material is not fit to bring a korban mincha, improper thought regarding an improper material, it doesn't matter. We disregard the improper thought. Now, of course, for this Menaḥot Omer, you're supposed to bring barley, but that's a chidush of the Torah. As an exception, this one you could bring from barley. Now you might ask, Minchat Kenaot is also brought from barley. It's true for a sotah. However, it's different type of barley. There it's coarse for a sotah. Here it's finely ground. So it's a different one. So this particular type of a form of barley flour is only done in Korban HaOmer, and therefore something considered not fit for use. Since it's not fit for use for Korban Mincha, the improper intention we can ignore, and also has to be in a place that is fit for avodah. And this would mean that if the mizbeach was damaged, something happened, and as one time happened when people threw things at the mizbeach, and the corner fell off. And so if the mizbeach is not fit and one has improper intention, we ignore that improper intention, because improper intention will only make something pasul if all these other three things are checked off on the checklist. And so here for Korban HaOmed, it's an improper item, and therefore we can ignore the improper thought, and the Korban is totally valid. Next, we're going to quote a long baraita and a long discussion after that about this baraita that revolves around the law that we mentioned, that something that's prohibited for a Jew to eat himself also will be prohibited as a sacrifice in the Mikdash. So here's the baraita. Tenor Banan. Ke'eshu omed min habakar lemata, she'en tamud lomad, ela lehotzi et haterefa. Way in the beginning of Sefer Vayikra, it starts off saying, "Daber el bnei Yisrael v'amar lehem adam ki yakrib mikem korban ladonai mina behema mina bakar mina son takribu et korbanchem." When you're going to bring a korban, it should be of the behema, of bakar, and of the son. Whenever you say the word min, that's a limiting word to say not everything in the category, but only some things that are within this category. And then the next pasuk says again, "Im ola korbano min habakar." So you have the word min habakar twice. Here min habakar from the cattle, and here from the cattle. Now, in fact, this is going in order. It's saying min habehema in general, if it's from behema, as opposed to birds or meal offerings that are going to be delineated after. Within the category of behema, there's two types of behema: bakar, cattle, big animals, cows and oxen; son, small animals, sheep and goats. If you're going to bring min habakar, so here's the laws of how you have to bring it. Okay, so in the simple reading, Pasuk Bet is a title. Here's all the things that we're going to discuss, and then it goes in one by one. Okay, here's the bakar laws, and later on, it'll have the other laws. Iminason, it goes to that next. However, the Midrash is going to read each of them as significant, and the first one, min habakar, means not any bakar is permitted. If you have an animal that was used for sin, like for avodah zarah, you cannot use it for a korban. Good. That's what we learned from min habakar in Pasuk Bet. All right, so now, why do we need again min habakar in Pasuk Gimel? That's what it's asking. And Talmud Omar, I don't need it. I already learned a bunch of things from Pasuk Bet. Oh, the one in Pasuk Gimel is coming to exclude yet another type of animal, a terefa. Terefa animal, it's sick. It's not going to live out 12 months. You cannot bring that as a korban. Okay, so that's what this pasuk is coming to teach. But now we challenge this. V'alo dinhu. Why do I need a pasuk? Can't I figure that out from a kal vachomer? Uma ba'almum shemutet lahejot asura lagavoa. An animal that has a blemish is permitted to a regular person. We have an animal that has some kind of blemish. So what? It's a kosher animal. You do shechita, you could eat it. But it's prohibited as a korban. That's explicit pesukim about animals that have a blemish. If so, terefa shasura lehejot and din shasura lagavoa, terefa, which is prohibited to a regular Jew. It's not kosher. Terefa, every time we do shechita, the shochet has to go and check and see outside, inside, all over, the lungs, everything, to make sure it was healthy. So all the more so, it would be prohibited for as a korban. I don't need a pasuk. I can learn it from a kal vachomer. The answer is no. The kal vachomer is a problem because here's an example, a counterexample. Chaylev, prohibited fat, and dam, which is prohibited to a regular person. These are prohibited. Both of these are prohibited to a regular Jew, but they are permitted to put on the mizbeach. Chelib and dam. You burn on the mizbeach. Dam, you sprinkle on the mizbeach. So you see that there is a counterexample that will undo the kal vachomer, and that's why we need the pasuk. No, we're going to counter that counter and show that the kal vachomer is actually good. Those are exceptional because cheleb and dam are just part of an animal where the rest of the animal is kosher. So yeah, when there could be a part of an animal that a person can't eat, but you can offer on the mizbeach. But you can't compare that to a whole animal. Can't compare it to the terefa, which the entire animal is prohibited. So if it's prohibited, the entire animal, to a regular person, all the more so it's prohibited to the mizbeach. And therefore I can learn it from a kal vachomer. I don't need the pasuk min habakar. Okay, we'll challenge the Kal Vachomer again. Milika tochiach shekula isur va'asura lehejot umuteret lagavoa. A bird that you do milika on the bird, that the entire thing, the whole bird, is prohibited to a regular person, and yet is permitted on the Mizbeach. And so you see here, this is a counterexample to the Kal Vachomer. Kal Vachomer is no good. That's why I need min habakar. We're good. We want to need min habakar for this, because otherwise we don't know what to do with it. No, but this Kal Vachomer also, this counter also we can challenge. Ma'ale milika sheken kedushata o sarta b'shat kedushata lemizbeach hi ne'eseret lahejot dahainu milikata aval kodem lachen lo ne'esra lahejot ma she'en ken b'trefa she'en kedushata o sarta. We're going to reassert the Kal Vachomer because this example from milika is not the same. The milika is not what's making it prohibited to a regular person to eat. It's the fact that it's kadosh, that once you consecrate it, it's prohibited for a regular person to eat. It's at the time of the Kiddushata lemizbeach, when it's consecrated to the mizbeach, it already becomes prohibited to a hejot, and then you have to do milika because it's a holy animal. However, before you consecrate it, it was not prohibited to a regular person. So it's not because it's the bird itself that's prohibited. But when the bird is born beforehand, before it's consecrated, it's permitted. That's not true for a terefa, where the fact that you made this terefa consecrated, that's not what made it prohibited to a regular person. It's because it's terefa. Either was born sick or got sick afterwards, doesn't matter. It's a terefa, it's already prohibited. The kedusha is not making it prohibited. So don't bring me an example of a bird, of milika. You say, oh, look, milika is prohibited to a regular person, but it's permitted to kavoa. No, it's not the milika. It's already before the milika. The consecration is what makes it prohibited. So yeah, of course, something consecrated is prohibited to a regular person because it's consecrated. So the milika is just a consequence of what happens after it's consecrated. And therefore, that is not a counterexample to the Kal Vachomer. The Kal Vachomer is good. And since the Kal Vachomer is good, we can learn from the Kal Vachomer that a terefa cannot be sacrificed. I don't need the pasuk min habakar. Back to our original question, why does the pasuk say min habakar the second time? Ve'im heshabta keshu omer min habakar lemata shen tamud omar lo sita terefa. The Baraita ends in a very unusual way. It says, if you have a response to that, then I will quote Min HaBakar the second time, because I don't need it to teach anything, because I already had it, the Min HaBakar in the pasuk before. I will say this is to exclude the terefa. So it's the Baraita is referencing, like, if at some point in the future, someone should figure out a refutation of the Kal Vachomer, that's what we have a min habakar here. We don't have a refutation of the Kal Vachomer. At this point in Baraita, the Kal Vachomer is good. It seems to be referencing some refutation, but it doesn't say what it is. So the Gemara asks, Mai im heshabta, what could be a possible refutation of the Kal Vachomer that would then require min habakar? We're going to have a few different answers. There's a mnemonic to remember the answers. Siman, Rekiach Mor Ada Le Shisheh. Amar Rav. That's Rekiach. It starts with the Resh. Rav starts with the Resh. Mishum De'ikal Memar. Mincha Ta'omer Tochiach She'asura Lahejot Umoteret Lagavoha. We could bring the example from Mincha Ta'omer. That's why this is here in this Masechet, or why we brought this whole discussion here. Mincha Ta'omer is prohibited to a regular person. This is Hadash, right? You didn't bring the Omer yet. So this barley is prohibited to a regular person, and yet it's permitted to Gavah, because we're going to take it and we're going to take the komets and we're going to burn it on the Mizbeach. So there you go. Here's an example of something that's prohibited to a regular person, but permitted to Gavoa. So that is a counterexample to the Kal Vachomer. Don't tell me that Terefa is a Kal Vachomer because prohibited to a regular person, therefore has to be prohibited to the Mizbeach. Maybe not. Maybe it's like Korban HaOmer. And then it's good. That's why we need Min HaBakar. But we reject this. Mali Mincha Ta'omer sheken materet chadash. No, the Mincha Ta'omer is itself what permits the chadash. So this is not a counterexample. Yeah, this barley is prohibited. It's prohibited for everything until you bring it. By bringing it, then that's exactly what permits what permits the barley. All the new barley going forward. So that is itself the thing that permits. You don't say that about terefa. The terefa doesn't make anything else permitted, so that's not a good example. Bashivi'it, wait a second. What happens when we bring Korban HaOmed on the 7th year? In the Shivi'it year, nothing grows. So there is no Chadash in Eretz Yisrael. Nothing that grows was planted that year. And there, now you still have to bring Korban HaOmed because Torah says, second day of Pesach, you still bring Korban HaOmed. So you're bringing Korban HaOmed, even though it's not making anything mutar, and yet, look, it's still something that's prohibited to a regular person that is permitted to Gavoa. And so this is a good counterexample because there's nothing special about it. It actually is not matir anything in the Shivi'it year. We answer, Shivit Nameh, Sheken Mater Sivichin Bashivi'it. No, even in the Shivi'it year, there is things that grow by themselves. Even if you don't plant them, they're just extra seeds around. They didn't sprout, or they fell, whatever, and they grow by themselves. During the Shivi'it year, Sifichin is permitted. So any Sifichin, aftergrowths of grain, would still be chadash and prohibited until you bring the omer. So even the Shivi'it year, the omer is permitting something. Oh, Rabbi Akiva, Dama Sivichin Asurin Bashivi'it. We can say that the Baraita is following the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says aftergrowths, things that grow by themselves, are prohibited during a Shivi'it year. And therefore, once again, the Korban HaOmed is not permitting anything. So there's nothing special about the Korban HaOmed. And therefore, we can bring it as a counterexample to the Kal Vachomer, because here we have something that's prohibited to most people, but permitted to make a sacrifice. And therefore, we can't say that anything prohibited, like terefa, just because it's prohibited to a regular person, doesn't make it necessarily prohibited to the Gavoa, because here we have Minchat HaOmer, and it doesn't permit anything. Amar le Rav Acha bar Abba le Rav Asher le Rabbi Akiva nami lifroch ma leminchat haomer sheken materet chadash bechusa laaretz. No, Rav Acha bar Abba tells Rav Asher, even according to Rabbi Akiva, it's true. Bringing the Korban HaOmer does not permit anything in Eretz Yisrael, because everything in Eretz Yisrael in the Shivi'it year, even the Sefichim, are prohibited. But anything that grows outside of Eretz Yisrael, that is prohibited as chadash until you bring the Korban HaOmer, and now it becomes permitted. So therefore, this is an exceptional law because it itself permits the new grain, and you can't bring this as a counterexample to the Kal Vachomer. And we answer, I feel leman de'amar chadash bechus aretz lav deoraita sheken ba'al lehatir lav shebetocha. No, even according to the opinion that says Hadash outside of Eretz Yisrael is not deoraita. This is a very important line because it's a huge machloket. Hadash outside of Eretz Yisrael, is it deoraita or drabanan? That will affect Hadash nowadays. If we have grain from outside of Israel, is it deoraita or drabanan? It will have huge effect on safek. A lot of things are safek. We're not sure exactly, did it grow in this season, that season, when was it cut? So if you have a safek drabanan, you could be lenient. Safek deoraita, you have to be stringent. Okay, so this is a huge discussion. But now the point is, we say that even according to the opinion that says Chadash outside of Israel is not deoraita, if it's the Rabbanan, then for sure the Korban HaOmer is not coming to permit anything mid-deoraita, and so there's nothing special about the Korban HaOmer. But even according to the person that says it's mid-Rabbanan, it is still coming to permit that which is inside the Mikdash, meaning the leftover of the Korban HaOmer itself. And so when you bring Korban HaOmer, even if it's not permitting anything else, it's Shivi'it year, we followed Rabbi Akiva, outside of Eretz Yisrael is not the Oraita, so bringing the Korban HaOmer does not permit anything in the whole world. Okay, fine, but know what it does permit? The rest of the flour that's in that bowl. You did kemitzah, and then the Kohanim can eat the rest of the flour. It's permitting that flour. And therefore, the Korban HaOmer is not a good example. It's a special law because it itself permits the rest of that flour. And that's why it's something that, in that case, it's something that is prohibited to a person, but permitted to Gavoa. But you can't bring that as a counterexample to Terefa. And therefore, the Kal Vachomer would stand. And since the Kal Vachomer stands, we wonder, Why do we need the words min habakar? Amar le Rav Acha medifti l'Ravina, ihachi terefa name takri v'tatir lav shebetocha. Rav Acha medifti tells Ravina, if so, if you're going to try to reject Rav's reasoning by comparing it to Hadash, and in the case of Hadash, it's by, you have this bowl of barley that's all prohibited, and then when you burn the komets, the rest of it and the rest of the material in the bowl becomes permitted. If so, you're going to make that comparison, then you may come to the conclusion that the same is true for terefa. If you have a teref animal, it's prohibited for anyone to eat, and so why not say, it's the same thing as chadash, that if you do shechita and burn part of this animal on the mizbeach, then maybe the rest of the meat of the terefa animal becomes permitted. Now that's obviously a preposterous conclusion, but that it would be a conclusion that you could come to if you're going to compare these two. So that is not a good way to refute Rav. Ela parichachi. Rather, to refute Rav, we can offer a simpler explanation. Don't bring me minchat ha'omer as a counterexample to the kavach omer, because minchat ha'omer, that's the mitzvah. The Torah says explicitly, here's how you're going to do it. Chadash is prohibited. Then, on that day, on the 16th of Pesach, you're still prohibited, but then you take the komets and put it on the mizbeach. I'm commanding you to do that, so you're allowed to do that. And then once you do that, the rest of it is permitted. That's what the Torah says. That's the mitzvah. There's no such mitzvah regarding a terefa that says that. And therefore, the law of Hadash is completely different. That's a special exception. And therefore, terefa is a regular law, and I can bring the law of terefa and say, well, akavach omer, if it's prohibited to a regular person, certainly it's prohibited to gavoa, and therefore have a kavach omer, and I don't need min habakar. And so we're back with our question. We refuted Rav's refutation of the kavach omer. So we're going to try another answer. So we're trying to look for, why did the Baraita say, if you can refute this kavach omer, what's a good refutation? Resh Lakish Amar, Mishum Tikal Memar Mefatem HaKetoret Yochiach She'asu Lehejot Umutar LaGavoa. Oh, you have the example of the person who prepares the ketoret, where he is prohibited to a hejot, but permitted to gavoa. We challenge the language here. Mefatem gabrahu. The one who prepares it is a person. The person is not prohibited. You mean the action. Okay, yes, we meant the action. Ela pitum haketoret yochiach she'asu lehejot mutar lagavoa. Preparing ketoret is a good disproof of the kavach omer, because it's prohibited to make ketoret at home. You can't go and say, I want to make something, use the same ingredients and prepare it just in the way it's in the Bet HaMikdash. Hejot is not allowed to do that, and yet it's permitted to do la gavoa. So here's an example of something that's permitted to a regular person, but it's permitted if you're doing it for the Bet HaMikdash, and so that will be a counterexample to the kavach omer. Just because a terefa is prohibited at home doesn't mean it's necessarily prohibited also in the mikdash. It could be like pitum haketoret. But we say, ma pitum haketoret sheken mitzvato bekach. No, pitum haketoret also is a special mitzvah. That's how you're supposed to make. You're supposed to do it like this. And so because it's an exception to the rule that here, this you could make it for the mikdash, but not at home, the pasuk says so explicitly, therefore you can't bring it as a counterexample to the kavach omer, because it's an explicit pasuk that says this is how you do it. But terefa, there's no explicit pasuk, so terefa still would be a good kavach omer. So we'd look for another answer. Mor bered Ravina Amar, Mishum Teikal Memar, Shabbat Tochiach She'asura Lehejot Muteret Lagavoa. We can prove it from the laws of Shabbat. Shabbat, you're not the old laws of Shabbat. A regular person cannot violate them. I'm not allowed to do shechita at home, burn things at home, cook things at home, but yet for the Bet HaMikdash it's permitted. Korban Tamid, Korban Musaf, you're allowed, you have to do shechita, burn the fire, do everything that you have to do for a korban. So here you have a counterexample to the kavach omer of melacha on Shabbat that's prohibited to a regular person but permitted to gavoa. But we reject that. Actually, Shabbat also is melacha on Shabbat is also permitted to a regular person. for Brit Milah. Brit Milah, the 8th day is on Shabbat. You're allowed to violate Shabbat. You have to violate Shabbat in order to do the Brit Milah. So you see, Shabbat, actually, there are circumstances where it's permitted both to Gavawa and to a regular person. Atu milah sorechejo. Atu milah mitzvahi. Wait a second. Brit milah. We're not doing it for ourselves because it brings us pleasure to do it. It's a mitzvah. We're doing it for the mitzvah. So this is not because I want to do it. It's because the Torah commanded us to do it. Ela mal Shabbat shekem mitzvata bekach. Okay, but we can still reject this by saying Shabbat is a mitzvah. The Torah says explicitly that you have to violate Shabbat in order to make korbanot. It doesn't say that explicitly about terefah. So therefore, Shabbat is exceptional, since it's explicitly an exception in the Torah. So that's why Shabbat is something you can't do at home, but you can do in the Mikdash. But you can't. That doesn't mean anything for terefah, and therefore the kal vachomer from terefah still stands. So now we're looking again for another way to reject the kal vachomer. Rava dabar Abba amar mishum deikal memar kilayim tochiach sheasurin lahedot muterin lagavoa. You could bring kilayim, mixing wool and linen, which is prohibited to do for any person, but is permitted in the Mikdash because the Kohen Gadol's belt is made from wool and linen. So look, there you go. Here's another thing that will reject the kal vachomer. It's not true that anything that's prohibited at home is necessarily prohibited in the Mikdash. Here's something that is prohibited at home and permitted in the Mikdash. So I would think that terefah could be the same. That's why I need minah bakar. No, actually, there is an example where a regular person is allowed to wear kilayim. If it's sisit, you can have wool and linen and sisit. Wait, even if someone wears wool and linen and sisit, they're not doing it because it's their own enjoyment. They're doing it because it's a mitzvah to wear sisit. Mitzvahi. Okay, fine. We still reject this answer because this is a special exception. There's a specific mitzvah that says that the Kohen has to wear this wool and linen belt. So that's the mitzvah. That's how you fulfill the mitzvah. So Torah goes out of its way to say it's permitted. But you can't use this as a counterexample to terefah, where no such mitzvah is brought, and therefore the kal vachomer still stands. So on the next daf, we'll try again to see what possible refutation of the kal vachomer the Braita may have had in mind. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.